They thought she was just the maid, dressed in a crisp uniform with a gentle smile and quiet demeanor. She seemed like any other staff member at the luxurious Sapphire Bay Resort. So when the wealthy Winslow family arrived, loud, entitled, and dripping in arrogance, they didn't hesitate to belittle her. They hurled insults, made demeaning comments, and treated her like she was beneath them. But what they didn't know was that the woman they mocked wasn't just another employee. She was the owner of the entire resort, a self-made billionaire who had built the empire from the ground up. What unfolded next wasn't just a story of humiliation flipped on its head, but a powerful lesson in respect, grace, and silent strength. This is the story of how one woman used elegance instead of ego to humble a family who thought money made them untouchable. And by the end, it wasn't the maid who walked away ashamed. It was the people who forgot that kindness always costs less than cruelty. The sun glistened over the crystal-clear waters of Sapphire Bay Resort, casting a warm golden hue on the white sands that wrapped around the island like a delicate ribbon. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the air smelled of sea salt, orchids, and wealth. This wasn't just a vacation spot, it was a sanctuary for the world's elite, a hidden paradise where opulence met exclusivity. A sleek white golf cart rolled to a stop at the circular driveway near the grand lobby entrance. Emblazoned with the resort's signature gold crest, it sparkled as if it had just left the showroom floor. Out stepped the Winslow family, each member dressed like they were walking a red carpet rather than checking into a resort. Edward Winslow, the patriarch, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a square jaw, silver-streaked hair, and an expression permanently set to important. As the CEO of a powerful tech conglomerate, he was used to being the smartest, richest, and most feared man in any room. His phone remained in his hand even as he stepped onto the island, already barking out instructions to an assistant back in New York. His wife, Lorraine, followed closely behind. She wore oversized sunglasses that hid her sharp eyes, a wide-brimmed designer hat, and a silk scarf that floated behind her like a cape. A walking Pinterest board of luxury fashion, she clutched a Birkin bag as though it were a rare artifact. Lorraine had spent most of her adult life building a reputation as an elite socialite, though her social media presence did more work than she did. Their teenage children, Chase and Brielle, completed the picture. Chase, 17, wore a designer tracksuit with untied sneakers and had earbuds in both ears. He scrolled aimlessly on his phone, barely looking up at the scenery. Brielle, 15, trailed just behind, snapping selfies with a pout perfected in front of bathroom mirrors and filtered lenses. As the family approached the marble steps leading to the resort's main entrance, several bellhops rushed forward and practiced unison, eager to please. The Winslows hardly noticed them, but one woman stood calmly apart from the flurry of activity. Dressed in a pressed white uniform and holding a small welcome folder, she stepped forward to greet them. "A good afternoon and welcome to Sapphire Bay," she said, her voice warm and steady. "Well, I hope your journey was pleasant." Lorraine's gaze swept over the woman as though scanning a rug at a discount store. "You can carry our bags," she said curtly, gesturing to the towering stack of designer luggage behind her. "And don't scratch them. They cost more than your entire salary." Edward didn't even glance at the woman. He continued on a Bluetooth call, giving instructions about stock options and legal loopholes. Chase laughed under his breath, then whispered to Brielle, "She looks like she came with the furniture." Brielle giggled. The woman didn't react. "Instead, I find some bottom-shelf bottle I wouldn't even use to clean my golf clubs. Fix it." The concierge, trained to remain calm under pressure, nodded and assured him it would be corrected, though his clenched jaw revealed how little he appreciated being spoken to like a grocery store clerk. Later that morning, Chase ignored the clearly posted adults-only sign and cannonballed into the resort's serene infinity pool, splashing water across 3 guests meditating poolside. The lifeguard tried to intervene, but Chase only laughed and said, "Hey, chill, it's just water." "Maybe you should have put up a bigger sign." Brielle spent the afternoon wandering the gardens with her phone, taking selfies in front of every flower display. At one point, she passed a newlywed couple posing for photos and giggled loudly. "Are you seriously using that phone camera? You do know we're not in 2012 anymore, right?" The bride, clearly embarrassed, turned away. The groom glared but said nothing. A resort photographer nearby shook her head in disbelief. By sundown, whispers had begun. They floated through the cabanas and around the fire pits, riding the wind that carried the scent of hibiscus and coconut oil. Who are these people? She sent back her lunch 3 times. Did you see the kid dive into the spa pool? I heard they yelled at the butler over a missing robe. Despite the beauty of the island, tension seemed to follow the Winslows like a storm cloud. That evening, Lorraine sauntered into the beachside bar, her heels clicking against the polished wood as she ordered a martini, extra dry, with lavender bitters. She sighed as though the air itself was too humid for her taste and took a seat at the end of the bar where candlelight flickered gently against the bottles. An older man, wearing a simple fisherman's hat and a weathered gold watch, was seated beside her. His clothes were casual, but his posture and the way staff greeted him hinted at someone important. He sipped a drink, neat, slow, then turned to her casually. Careful how you treat the staff here, he said, voice low and unassuming. You don't know who's watching. Lorraine looked him up and down. Excuse me, he smiled mildly. You see, some of the people you think work for you might not. Lorraine scoffed. Oh, please. I've seen 3-star hotels with better service. They're lucky we're here. Most guests wish they had our taste. The man chuckled quietly and turned back to his drink. Maybe, or maybe, you're in a 5-star story with a 6-star twist. He stood up, dropped a folded bill onto the bar, and disappeared into the night like mist. Lorraine watched him go, confused but dismissive, and rolled her eyes. "A weird old man," she muttered. But that's when things began to shift. The next morning, their breakfast never came. After waiting nearly 40 minutes, Edward called the front desk. "Apologies, sir," came the overly sweet reply. "There was a mix-up in the kitchen. We'll send it right away." When it did arrive, the eggs were undercooked and Lorraine's latte had almond milk. She only drank oat. "I swear they're doing this on purpose," she fumed. Later, Lorraine headed to the spa for her 2:00 p.m. massage appointment, only to be told there was no record of her booking. "That's impossible," she snapped. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. We've been fully booked since yesterday," the receptionist replied. "Would you like to be added to the cancellation list? Do I look like someone who waits?" Lorraine hissed before storming out. Meanwhile, Chase was informed by a lifeguard that his access to the adults-only pool had been revoked due to multiple complaints. "A what? From who?" he asked. "I'm not at liberty to say," the lifeguard said calmly, "but the manager has reviewed the footage." Brielle's phone glitched repeatedly during a live stream she attempted from the villa balcony. This resort has the worst Wi-Fi. "Don't they know who we are?" The Winslows regrouped later that afternoon in their villa's lounge, each of them irritated and confused. Edward had spent an hour trying to reach the resort manager with no response. "They're deliberately sabotaging us," Lorraine declared. "This is unprofessional." Professional. "No, it's personal." But why?" Brielle asked, scrolling through her half-loaded social feed. "We haven't done anything wrong." Chase smirked. "Maybe they're just jealous. We're probably the richest people here." "It doesn't matter," Edward said, pacing. "They'll regret treating us like this." Outside the villa, a staff member passed by and overheard the conversation. She smiled to herself, then continued on her way, her steps light. That night, as they walked to the gala dinner, Edward spotted the woman they had first met at check-in, the one Lorraine had ordered to carry their bags. She was walking near the back of the garden, dressed in her same pressed uniform, clipboard in hand. He stared at her for a moment. There was something about the way she moved, confident, purposeful. She didn't shrink away from his gaze. Edward narrowed his eyes. "Something about her bugs me," he muttered. Lorraine glanced over and frowned. Still lurking around? Probably trying to eavesdrop, but as they continued toward the banquet area, something in the air had changed. A few guests greeted the Winslows politely, but their smiles were thin. There were no nods of admiration or subtle looks of envy anymore. Just cool politeness and eyes that watched. The Winslows still didn't know it yet, but the island was watching, and someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, and the woman they had dismissed was far more than just the help. By the 4th evening of their stay at Sapphire Bay, the Winslows believed they'd endured enough incompetence from the resort staff. Edward was fuming. Lorraine was emotionally drained from what she dubbed a deliberate attacks on her standards, and the children were sulking over limited Wi-Fi and revoked privileges. They had no idea the resort was about to turn their world completely upside down. That night, the Grand Gala was set to begin at sundown, a highly anticipated event reserved for distinguished guests complete with live music, gourmet cuisine, and a guest list that read like a who's who of quiet wealth and global influence. The Winslows emerged from their villa in full splendor. Edward wore a custom tuxedo with silver cufflinks engraved with his initials. Lorraine had selected a couture evening gown flown in from Milan just before their trip. Its shimmering navy silk trailed behind her like a wave. Chase and Brielle, too, were dressed in designer threads that cost more than some guests' entire vacation. They expected red carpet treatment. Instead, they were greeted at the event entrance by a smiling host who handed them name cards with table numbers. Lorraine glanced at hers and blinked. "A table? 16?" she muttered. They followed the host through the garden courtyard, winding past beautifully lit tables arranged under strings of glowing lanterns. Each table seemed grander than the last, crystal glasses, gold-rimmed china, flower arrangements that looked like works of art. The Winslows assumed theirs would be up front, near the stage, and the VIP. Instead, they were escorted to a table tucked near the kitchen entrance, half shielded by a decorative hedge and just close enough to hear the metallic clang of pans and the beeping of service timers behind the double doors. "This must be a mistake," Edward said, voice low and tense. "They put us near the kitchen?" Lorraine's face darkened. "Absolutely not. This is disrespectful." Just then, a familiar figure approached. She wore a tailored black gown that shimmered softly in the lantern light, her hair elegantly pinned up. Diamond earrings glinted with every step. Her presence was graceful, composed, commanding even. She moved like someone who belonged not just at the party, but above it. It was the woman they had dismissed upon arrival. The maid. "A good evening," she said coolly. "Is there a problem with your table?" Edward narrowed his eyes, unsure. You were the..." Before he could piece it together, another figure joined them, the older man from the bar. He wore a crisp white suit now, no fisherman's hat in sight. He extended a hand toward the woman with practiced deference. "And Miss Hamilton," he said. "Hamilton," he said. "Your guests are seated." "Everything to your liking," she turned to him with a smile. Perfect, Gerald. Thank you." Then she faced the Winslows again. "I don't believe we were formally introduced," she said, voice even and direct. "I'm Aria Hamilton. I own Sapphire Bay." The silence was thunderous. Edward's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Lorraine blinked, processing the transformation. Chase and Brielle looked between their parents and the woman they had mocked. "War, Miss Hamilton," Lorraine gasped. "You own the resort?" Aria gave a polite nod, her gaze unflinching. "Yes." It was as if the entire room tilted. The servers who had once been dismissed now stood straighter. The concierge who had been berated earlier passed by and gave Aria a slight bow. Guests at nearby tables began whispering, not with gossip, but with curiosity and admiration. Lorraine tried to recover. "Well, that explains the confusion with the table. I mean, I'm sure this wasn't intentional." Aria tilted her head slightly. "Oh, it's quite intentional." A few nearby guests quieted, sensing something was happening. The band played on, but softer now. "Fire. I like to observe," Aria continued. "I find it telling how people treat those they believe are beneath them. I started as a server on this very island 10 years ago. I cleaned rooms, carried bags, and washed dishes in the back kitchen you're now seated near." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I also built a company from the ground up. Bought this resort 3 years ago when the previous owners filed for bankruptcy. And tonight, I chose to be among the staff again. Not because I had to, but because I believe in remembering where I came from." Edward straightened. "Look, we didn't mean to offend." "You did," Aria cut in, calmly, repeatedly. Lorraine's jaw tensed. "Well, if we had known." But you didn't," Aria interrupted again, her tone soft but razor-sharp. "And that's the point. You didn't need to know someone's title to show them decency. Yet, at every turn, you chose to belittle, dismiss, and insult. Not just me. The people who make this resort function." A waiter placed a drink on her tray with a nod and walked away. Proudly, Edward glanced around the room. People were watching and not admiring. "Well," Lorraine said finally, trying to smile, "we certainly appreciate your hospitality now." "I'm sure you do," Aria replied. "However, I've instructed staff to continue offering you basic services. No one here will stoop to your level, but don't expect special treatment anymore." Then she paused, her gaze sweeping across all four family members. In fact, you should be grateful you weren't asked to leave. She turned to go, her heels clicking against the flagstone path with finality. The older man, Gerald, nodded to the Winslows before walking away with her, leaving a trail of silence in their wake. Back at their table, the family sat stunned. Chase looked down at his plate. So, she's like a billionaire? Brielle slouched, embarrassed for the first time in days. Oh, and we were total jerks. Edward rubbed his temple, his power and pride wilting under the weight of his mistake. Lorraine watched Aria move through the crowd with effortless dignity. Guests greeted her warmly like they were speaking to royalty, and she responded not with arrogance, but with grace. No one laughed at the Winslows now, but no one envied them either. Because tonight, the spotlight had shifted, and for the first time in their lives, they weren't the stars of the story. They were just a cautionary tale at the edge of a gala they no longer deserved. The next morning, a heavy tension lingered in the Winslow villa. No one mentioned the gala or the reveal. Lorraine sat on the patio, scrolling her phone aimlessly, while Chase and Brielle kept their eyes glued to their devices, unusually quiet. But Edward couldn't shake the weight on his chest. He didn't just feel embarrassed. He felt exposed. He had made a career of commanding boardrooms, silencing opposition with intellect and authority. But last night, standing under lantern light, he had looked small next to a woman he'd dismissed without a second thought. He asked to speak with her. To his surprise, the request was granted. The concierge guided him to the Solstice Lounge, an opulent but discreet corner of the resort reserved for private meetings. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the sea, but Edward barely noticed. Aria was already there. She sat in an ivory pantsuit sipping a cup of tea, entirely composed. She didn't stand when he entered, nor did she smile. He cleared his throat. "A thank you for seeing me." She gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit," he obeyed. "I wanted to apologize," he began, folding his hands. "We didn't know who you were or what you'd accomplished." Her eyes didn't waver. "I didn't know that I was wealthy, that I owned the land under your feet, or that I wasn't a maid simply because I wore a uniform," he swallowed. "I meant, we made assumptions, wrong ones." She tilted her head slightly, her voice calm. But I was black and in service, so I must not be important. Edward shifted uncomfortably. "No, I run a global company. I know better than anyone that talent comes in all shapes, colors, backgrounds. I wasn't trying to offend anyone. But you did." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. There was a gravity in her words that pressed on his conscience. She sat back. "Let me tell you a story." Edward leaned forward, caught between discomfort and curiosity. My mother worked as a housekeeper at a resort very much like this one. She began. I was 8 when I started helping her fold towels at night. Not because I was told to, but because she needed me. We didn't have much, but my mother had pride, dignity. She used to say, no one's job makes them small, only their actions do. Edward watched her, the image forming in his mind. A young girl in the shadows of polished halls, unseen by vacationers, quietly folding linens with her mother. "I studied at night," she continued. "Hospitality, business. I read management books during my lunch breaks while working banquet shifts, saved every tip I got. Eventually, I earned a scholarship to study hotel management in Switzerland. From there, I interned in Dubai, managed a property in Singapore, and by the time I was 30, I was consulting for luxury resorts around the world." She set her cup down with gentle precision. When Sapphire Bay went bankrupt, I bought it. Quietly, through a holding company. I didn't want the press attention. I wanted to build something that honored my mother's legacy, a place where dignity mattered more than status. Edward's face was unreadable. He sat frozen, absorbing each word like a blow. "I still wear the uniform sometimes," Aria added. "Not for nostalgia, for truth. It's the only way to see how people really treat others." She paused and looked him dead in the eyes. "You failed that test." Edward's jaw clenched. "I see that now." "I'm ashamed, truly." "You should be," she replied. "But shame won't teach your children. Only change will." Her words echoed through the room like a chime in a cathedral. He looked down, suddenly aware of how deeply this moment would stay with him. "I don't need your apology," Arius said. "It won't undo how your wife spoke to me, or how your son laughed, or how your daughter sneered at others trying to capture happy memories." Edward nodded slowly. Then why agree to meet with me? She hesitated before answering. Because I believe in second chances. Not everyone deserves them, but some will do better if they're given a reason to try. There was a long silence. He took a breath, searching for words that didn't feel hollow. I built my company from the ground up, too. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to work under someone's gaze, hoping to be seen, heard, treated with respect. He rubbed his temples. I've taught my kids everything about wealth, except what it means to be human. Arya looked at him, softer now, but still resolute. Then maybe it's time you start. Edward glanced out the window. The waves rolled gently against the shore. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel powerful. He felt like a man being humbled in the most important way. He stood. Miss Hamilton, he said, voice low but steady. A thank you for your time and for your story. I won't forget it. She gave a nod not as a farewell, but as a final reminder. Make sure your family doesn't either. As Edward left the lounge, the sun bathed the resort in a golden glow. He spotted a gardener watering plants near the path, a bellhop holding a family's bags with care, and a housekeeper smiling as she tidied up the lobby. He saw them now, not as background, but as people. Arya didn't need to humiliate him. She simply told the truth. And somehow that had been far more powerful. The Winslows packed quietly that morning. Gone were the smug remarks and arrogant demands. The atmosphere inside their luxury villa was no longer one of superiority, but of silent reflection. Lorraine moved with a kind of robotic detachment, folding clothes without her usual flair or insistence on being waited on. Her oversized sunglasses shielded her eyes, not from the sun, but from the stares she feared outside. Brielle scrolled aimlessly through her phone, no longer posting snide captions or vacation selfies. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she sighed and put it down. Chase, once boisterous and loud, now lingered near the window, staring out at the ocean like it held answers to questions he didn't yet know how to ask. Edward was the only one who had spoken that morning, and even then, only to ask the kids to hurry up. But his voice lacked its usual commanding edge. He'd spent the night walking the beach, shoes in hand, waves lapping at his ankles as if to erode his pride grain by grain. Now, they were ready to leave. As they walked together toward the checkout desk, each step felt heavier than the last. Resort staff moved graciously through the space, performing their duties with the same professionalism as always. But now, the Winslows noticed the difference. The nods were more measured. The glances carried weight. These weren't just workers anymore. They were people, and they remembered. Chase and Brielle kept their eyes down, avoiding every gaze. Lorraine's lips were pressed so tightly they had turned pale. She clutched her designer purse as if it were a lifeline. Edward looked up as they neared the front desk, and there she was, Arya Hamilton. Poised, composed, and radiant in a crisp cream blouse and navy slacks. Her nameplate on a counter caught the morning light. General Manager Arya Hamilton. But everyone here knew it meant more. It wasn't just a title, it was a reminder. Edward offered her a weak smile, something between apology and acknowledgement. Arya returned a polite nod, her expression unreadable but not cold. She did not gloat. She didn't need to. Before stepping into the resort's sleek golf cart that would take them to the boat dock, Brielle paused. Her steps slowed. She looked back over her shoulder and met Arya's eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Her voice cracked, barely audible. "You were nice to us." "We weren't." Arya held her gaze for a moment, then smiled gently. Thank you, Brielle," she replied. "It's never too late to learn respect." The girl gave a small nod and hurried to join her family. Her face flushed with something deeper than embarrassment. Shame. The cart rolled away down the palm-lined path, wheels whispering across the stone-paved drive, and the family disappeared behind swaying fronds. Back in the lobby, a young staff member approached Arya, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You really let them leave without saying anything?" Arya turned to her with a small knowing smile. "I said everything I needed to." "Oh, but why didn't you kick them out?" the girl asked, still incredulous, "after how they treated everyone." Arya glanced toward the large glass doors where the morning light streamed in. Because letting them see who I am," she said, "was punishment enough." She rested a hand on the marble counter and looked out at the horizon. Some people learn through consequences. Others learn through clarity. The staff member nodded slowly. beginning to understand. Arya wasn't just teaching the Winslows a lesson, she was teaching everyone who watched. Back at the boat dock, as the Winslows waited in silence, Edward cleared his throat. "I had a meeting with Miss Hamilton yesterday," he said quietly. No one responded, but Lorraine finally turned her head slightly, signaling she was listening. She told me her story, about her mother, about building all this from the ground up. Chase blinked. "Oh, wait, so she really owns everything here?" "Oh, yes," Edward confirmed. "She built this resort." Every inch of it, from nothing. Lorraine looked away. She wore that maid outfit on purpose. "Ah, she did," Edward said, "because it shows who we are when we think no one's watching." The family said nothing more. The boat arrived, gleaming in the sun, and a uniformed crew member stepped forward to welcome them aboard. This time, Edward met the man's eyes. "Thank you," he said with a sincerity that surprised even him. Back at Sapphire Bay, Arya walked the grounds, as she did every morning. She stopped to greet guests, checked in on staff, and inspected the gardens. Her presence was quiet but commanding. No corner of the resort was beneath her notice. Later, as she sipped a fresh juice on the veranda, Gerald, the older gentleman from the bar who had recognized the Winslows' behavior for what it was, joined her. "They left?" he asked. "They did? Changed?" Arya thought for a moment. Beginning to, he chuckled. "That's more than most ever get." She looked out at the ocean, where the Winslows' boat grew smaller in the distance. "I'll remember this place, not because it was beautiful, but because it made them uncomfortable. Sometimes that's where growth starts." Gerald raised his glass. "Ate to uncomfortable truths." Arya clinked hers against his, and rising above them, the sun rose higher over Sapphire Bay, warming the sand and sparkling on the waves. A new group of guests had arrived. Families, honeymooners, retirees, and Arya greeted them all with the same warm smile. But behind that smile were eyes that saw everything. Every gesture, every glance, every moment of kindness or cruelty, because she had walked every path on this island, from housekeeper to owner, from invisible to unforgettable, and she never stopped watching. In life, titles and wealth can give people power, but they can never replace dignity, kindness, or humility. The Winslows came to Sapphire Bay expecting to be treated like royalty. Instead, they were taught a lesson in humanity by the very woman they looked down upon. Arya Hamilton didn't need revenge. Her strength was in her grace, her success, and her ability to rise above the hate. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who say the least, but see everything. If this story moved you, inspired you, or even surprised you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. On this channel, we bring you real emotions, powerful messages, and stories that reveal the hidden truths behind everyday encounters. Let us know in the comments. Have you ever judged someone too quickly and been proven wrong? Until next time, keep your heart open and your mind wide. Thanks for watching Hidden Realities.